Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Blacklist. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I think this week's Blacklister is really interesting. In fact, I actually think the premise of this Blacklister situation could be an interesting show in its own right. But basically, you have Dr. Roberta Sands. She's basically a therapist for bad guys. She basically helps them figure themselves out, love themselves, figure their whole mess out, and become the most proficient criminals they can be. Now, granted, she works very specifically with one family, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I think this could be a premise of a show all on its own. I think it could be a really interesting crime drama. I mean, there probably is already something that exists in some shape or form similar to this. I can already think of shows I'm aware of that are slightly similar. There was a Fox show that was short-lived. It had, I was butchered, it's Miss Spiro. I want to say it's Jordan Spiro. I always want to say, I don't know if it's Jordana, but I want to say it's Jordan. I don't think it's Jordana. I think it's Jordan Spiro. She was basically, it was called Mob Doctor. She was like, she was a doctor that had ties to the mob, and she basically helped patch them up and stuff like that. So, kind of the duality of her life in that regard. There was also another show that's actually coming up soon to Fox called The Cleaning Lady. It's actually like an American adaptation of like a Spanish drama of the same premise. Basically, it's like a lady who, I think she's like the cleaning lady. She gets forced into being the cleaning lady for the cartel. But a therapist. Because if I had to compare it, it'd be like The Cleaning Lady meet Unnecessary Roughness really quickly. If you're familiar with what Unnecessary Roughness is, I believe the actress's name is Callie Thorne. I could be mistaken. Basically, she played a therapist to professional sports players. Like, she did it. Like, the main person was like people from a football team, maybe a race car driver, or a baseball player. Like different professional sports people. She was basically their therapist to help them through stuff. So like a more like crime drama based version of that. I'm going on a whole tangent, but I was like, man, I really like this element of it. But basically, she helped a shooter. Basically, well, he was like a sniper, and he ended up killing someone. Now, at first, they thought it was like, oh man, it's this other person that he was trying to aim for. But it's like, no, his target was the target the entire time, because basically, well, initially it seemed like they killed her because basically she was about keeping historical places the same. So like anytime any type of development was supposed to be happening in a particular area, like she would kind of put the kibosh on a lot of that stuff. She spike it, as Reddington says. So now it's about, because the crime family Sands represents was actually weak at one point in time, but because of her actual therapy sessions, now like the head of the crime family is all about getting everyone to see her, including his own sons. We even got the trio of them, and 2 out of the 3 are all about it, but one of the sons kind of fought therapy. It's just like, she's like, given enough time, I could swing it, but no. I love some interesting developments connected to this case. First and foremost, it's like, oh man, we found out about Aram having been in therapy since he was 10 because because of calculus. And it's like, wait, you learned calculus at 10? He was like, no, I learned calculus at 8. I tried to teach it at 10, and it was too much for my parents to comprehend, and it kind of like it was a pretty rough time. And I was like, wow. I love that Aram is just like this spring of information. Just every time you turn around, you're learning something about him. And like, really? Because you never learn about people in this show the way you learn about Aram. He's always sprinkled in little stuff here and there. But I also love the conversation about like, oh man, like who could have taken that shot? You know, because being on that other building seems like a different county. And you have Dim Baby like, I could have taken that shot. And then Aram looks at him and was like, wait, what? You could have? And even then being like, yeah, like later on referencing like, we got an expert who could have taken a shot from blank to blank distance. So it's like, Dembe just knew exactly where to go. I even love that he went to visit his buddy Jean, and she's like, yo, like Red showed up later. He showed up with like Weecha. It's like, yeah, she's supposed to be like the new you. What happens? Like, me and Reddington, we had a good run, but it's like, oh, so what are you doing with your new life now? He's like, an FBI agent, and she's smiling, laughing, going like, ha ha ha, because no one's gonna believe that. It's like, well, except for the people that actually know it, but no one's gonna be like, wait, Dembe Zuma, an FBI agent? Get out of town. No, you're talking about Raymond Reddington's criminal right-hand man? No way. It's like, no one would believe that. Like, it's a hard pill to swallow. It's interesting, too, because they talked about it a little bit, and I'm wondering if there's anything to it, but wrestler did take the day off. He says they said it was like for something personal. I'm like, what was that about? We'll have to wait and see. But I'm like, that just seemed interesting. You'd think if anyone was going to be away, it'd be Park, but no, she's still here, recovering from the weapon from last episode. And obviously the complicated relationship with her husband, where it's like, he's saying that she should be more sorry, because the fact is that, no, he's like, I should be the one that's sorry, because I married someone that I don't really know at all. Like, do I really know you? And that's going to be the sad part. Like, the fact is that you are so good at hiding stuff and lying to me, you know, and obviously, that complicates things, because it's like, right, not only did I lie about this job, because she was like, I wanted to bring you here because I shouldn't lie to you about what I'm up to or hide this from you. Like, what I do is a secret, but you should at least know what I'm up to, and especially not knowing if this job is what cost them their baby. So I wonder, is that guy who actually took the shot this episode, like the sniper, because they ended up catching him, because I love Dembe's smooth move of leaving his shoes behind to catch the, first and foremost, like getting the mirror from the vehicle as a way to kind of blind him, and then you left your shoes behind while he was distracted before he destroyed the mirror and got rid of the reflection. You snuck up on him because you left your shoes behind. He thought like he got you, and it's like, nah, that's pretty good. I think Dembe, you know, being who he is, would understand like your process better than anyone. He knew like how to take advantage of the situation. But the way they talked about it is like, oh yeah, like Dr. Sands, we think she's even more dangerous because she was able to convince you to think it was okay to kill someone. So they made it sound like this guy, like, you know, because I guess he isn't someone that typically would do this, because he's not the go-to hitman guy. I think that's why his therapy session at the beginning was him being like, oh, I don't know if I could do this. Because I thought that was twisted when it seemed like, oh, he was going to participate in something, and it's like, oh, participating in taking someone's life is what he was partaking in. But it seems like, yeah, because he was someone from the range, because Dembe knew to go to Jean because of that. Like, only someone that went to the range where she was at would know how to take a shot like that. So yeah, the guy was just someone who's good at, they found someone that was good at the job, and they kind of put him in a position, probably like, oh, we'll give you a lot of money to take this shot. And Dr. Sands talked him into actually taking, like, it seems like this might be the first person he potentially ever killed. So they were able to convince him of like, right, Dembe's like, I know what it's like to do a lot of wrong, and you have your regrets about it. It's like, so do the right thing now. So that led to them catching Dr. Sands, which is interesting because like the whole thing is in the disguise of like a groomer setup. But I love that her actual therapy like thing is actually in it, like it's a mobile thing, because when they get into the truck they actually see it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I guess makes it a little easier. I mean, maybe I wonder, does it actually help with the flow of therapy or not? But they capture Sands, and it turns out her main motivator for doing this is her son. She had a complication with her son's father, and Dante got into such serious trouble acting out and stuff like that he actually got in trouble with the police. Home dude from the crime family promised to protect him, keep him out of jail if she helped. So everything she was doing was in service of looking after her son. But now it's like, now home dude, who's the leader of the crime family, wants her son to participate in crime. So it's like, right, I'll help you if it means you actually protecting me and my son from this guy and helping him out. So I guess Dante kept it hush hush. I guess only like the head of the family knows that Dante's mom is Dr. Sands. I guess like, well, because to be told, she uses a fake name, because Sands, Roberta Sands isn't her actual real name. So, but maybe that's why. Because like he references, they're like, oh, you should go see her. And he's like, Dr. Sands is like, nah, like, I don't know if even Dante at that time knew that his mom was the same person. I don't know if he put that together, or maybe he did and he was just like hiding it from them about the whole thing. He's like, oh, maybe, you know, if you weren't, maybe you weren't ready for therapy, but, luckily they showed up in time. That went down a lot smoother than I thought it was. Like, everyone got arrested. I mean, Dante as well, because he was mixed up in all of this, but it's still, that was still fascinating. So that kind of went down pretty seamlessly. Other elements to this episode is, Agnes spending time with Reddington. And at first she said some stuff, I was like, wait, what? When she was like, oh no, it's okay. Like, he's like, oh, like you gotta name like the capitals of like the states and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, like, you know, my memory's not that bad. She's like, oh, you have an excuse, you're from Russia. And he was like, what? I was like, where'd you get that from? I was like, that's weird. I was like, and he's like, oh, where'd you hear that from? And she was like, my mommy told me. I was like, wait, what? I was like, wait, I was like, and then the way that she was having the conversation, she was like, yeah, mom said like, that you were the most, like, she told me a lot of stuff about you, but she was like, yeah, you're still like the most, next to me, like, you were the most important person, you cared a lot, and that you like to hold hands, even saying like, yeah, like, if the time came, like, I should want to see you one more time afterwards. I was like, Liz had to say this after they hung out all together. So I was like, it had to be a little before she died. Then I was like, wait, I was like, that's weird. I was like, well, I guess because I was like, Reddington, you're so important to her and stuff like that. Because I was like, well, she died not knowing the truth. But Reddington was like weirded out by it. He was like, what's up with that? So he kind of distanced himself from Agnes and he went to Liz's place or whatever, and he got the letter. And he was like running fingerprints on it. And it's like, why? He's like, I told Dembe to give this to her, but only after I die. And he wanted to know if Liz had read the letter, because it's like, maybe that, because Liz wouldn't have told her that type of stuff. Because even I was like, why would she tell her that type of stuff? But it, ultimately, Reddington has the prints run by his buddy Ivan. And I love Weecha being like, oh, like, if I have just a finger, can you run it? And he's like, oh, be easier if you had a head. And he's like, him and Reddington are laughing, haha. She's like, you figured out that fingerprint, and I'll give you one ahead of box. And it's just like, wait, is this what you brought me here for? He's like, no. But Reddington's like, I love a crossing of the streams. I'm like, what the hell is that all about? Is that going to be a plot point? Whose finger is it? I guess it's someone she crossed paths with. She got their finger, she just doesn't know where they are. And it's like, cool, you help me identify that finger and find out where that person is. I will go track them down and they will lose their head. I'm like, that's interesting. Like, I hope that whatever that is a plot point, or is that just gonna be like some nonsensical like background stuff for Reacher, but we never really get to dive into it. Like, I don't know, that that's such an interesting badass story waiting to be unveiled. But Reddington ultimately ends up finding out that the letter was Liz prints were on the letter. It's like, dude, because that was the biggest thing for Reddington, like why this is such a big deal, because, Reacher was like, isn't it a good thing that if Liz died, at least she died knowing the truth and she told your daughter? But for Reddington, it's like, no, if she knew the truth, that's a bad thing, because that would explain in that moment why she hesitated. She knew who I really was. You're like, oh my God. Because of that, that's why he didn't want her to know that if she knew, she wouldn't have done what was necessary. And in the moment, she didn't. And it's like, we thought it was just like she hesitated because she cared so much about Reddington, which is true, but it's because she knew the truth. She knew that who you really were. And it's like, of course she wasn't going to be able to pull the trigger on you when the time came. And it's like, Jesus. And that got her killed. And now he knows the person who gave her that letter was Denbei. It's like, this ain't the first time this has come up. Like, Denbei's always said time and time again, he's always wanted Reddington to tell her the truth. And maybe in his own way, because he loved Reddington and he didn't want things to play out this way for Reddington. He wanted there to be another way. So he told Liz the truth. No shape or form did he expect. Like, no one saw it going down like that. But Reddington was like, at the very least, if she didn't know the truth, she would have pulled the trigger. She could have been out there. It's because she hesitated, because she was in a vulnerable position for so long. Like, all it took was a couple seconds, and if she had killed me and walked away, this wouldn't be what it is. But Denbei had, like, now he's pissed because it's like, Denbei basically killed her. Like, he's been betrayed by the people's closest to him, granted. He even got betrayed by Liz on a couple occasions, but she was always going to get leeway being his, being her child, being her parent, like, being her mom. You would always going to cut her slack. But obviously we saw what the Kate situation turned out to be. Denbei has been in that position where he was framed to be, but that was like by Kate, like, set him up to be like that. He was trying to find out who was really behind it. But also Denbei's been in this position where he had to choose between someone else and Reddington. So it's like, it's always been there. The complications and the cost of that loyalty. Like, in no shape or form did Denbei know that things were going to play out like that. He thought he was doing what was best for everyone, because he knew that if Liz found out she pulled the trigger on her mom, she'd never forgive herself. And it's like, right, he wanted Reddington to be around. It's like, right, we could have probably found another way. But once again, he always wanted Reddington to tell her the truth. And it's like, right, before you do this thing, like, you deserve to know, but, you know, and maybe that's also, now we're actually getting and understanding why Dembe became an FBI agent, because he hasn't explained this to anyone else, but that's what he's there for. Everyone's driven by their guilt. Everyone went their separate ways and did their own thing, but it's like, right, he became a cop because he feels like he owes it to Liz, because he's been beating himself up and blaming himself. But truth be told, is maybe on some level, he's like, no, I don't blame me, I blame you. You put her in that position. You put me in this position by having the letter that could give her all the answers she's ever wanted, and you wanted me to wait until after she pulled the trigger on you, which that would be devastating. Like, the fact of the matter is, the person she's been trying to get answers from her entire life, wanted to know her entire life. You were here and you were never going to tell her. In fact, you were going to tell her after you were dead. And you would rob your grandchild of ever knowing you too. So I think that plays elements into it as well, like Dembe's decision. So I think for him, it might, you know, and that might even play even more into the conversation he had this episode about, because he's done other stuff he regrets, but I think that in particular, it's like, no, like, if he knows that without that and like what it did to Reddington losing her, it's like, you know, he tried to do what he thought was right and was the best option, and now it led to this. But I think everything he's done has been his own path to redemption, trying to make it up to her. So that's fascinating. Reddington himself actually broke Sands and her child out of prison. And once again, it's just like, reputation precedes you, because it's like, oh, hi. She's like, you're Raymond Reddington. It's like, yeah. It's like, are you working for it? It's like, no. That person's locked up. I'm going to handle this stuff myself. So he actually needs her help. He's like, right. We could go to any island of your preference. Like, you will never get mixed up in my criminal work. But she's like, if I'm helping you personally, it's helping you criminally. So he's just like, yeah, but the reason why I'm choosing you, because you are the best at what you do. Plus, my story is enough to kind of scare anyone else off with all the details. So I needed to be someone I can like unburden myself to with the complicated history that is Raymond Reddington. There's so much. I mean, to be fair, there is 8 seasons worth of stuff, plus like the prior, 20 plus years, prior. So it's, it all works out in that regard. But he ends up talking to her at the end about it, and it's just like the frustrating thing, for him, it's like he found peace in everything, but he constantly finds himself drawn back into the darkness. And the fact is that he's scared of, like, if he does this next thing, it's going to be into a darkness he's never going to be able to pull himself up of. And she's like, what's triggering this now of all times? He's like, right, I found out my closest friend betrayed me, and I am just furious about it. So the question is, once again, when it comes to people betraying him, and them, especially something of this magnitude, it's like, because of you, Liz is dead. Agnes will grow up without her daughter, without her mother. My daughter should be, a child should always outlive their parent, not their parent outliving their child. It should never work that way, Agnes should have been able to grow old with her mom, considering she already didn't have her dad around, so a lot of that's going to be fueling Reddington's decision, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that progresses. But also, I'm curious, are we going to get a lot more of Sands? I mean, because he said it was like a trial basis for like 3 months. Beyond that, after that, you could do whatever you want to. I'll ensure your safety and you and your son. Other than that, we have Harold in a very compromised position because he's talking to Lou, which Lou's trying to help him out. Like, it's like, right, we both know that the ballistics will come back, and a detective who's been looking into this stuff, he will come after me again. He's already asking questions. Because, Harold is the honest man that he is, so he compromised his wife by getting her involved, and now he feels like he's doing the same thing, but Lou has his back. It's like, cool. I basically worked my magic and exchanged the test results for the bullet. Now, the fact is that he's like, I know you didn't do it, so I'm not worried about it. Now that you got the free time, you could actually find out who it is, who framed you, and for what purpose, Because whoever it is has to have enough knowledge to know what Harold is a part of. Because, like, the way he gets the call later on, it's a blackmail situation of, oh, you want to get me what I want? Because I have evidence that will be able to take you and Lou down. Which I'm suspicious of Lou. Once again, because that actor recently played a suspicious role. I won't go into it too much, but he was in American Rust, and if you've seen the show, you know what his story was. If you haven't, I'll leave it out of it. But I'm just kind of suspicious of it, because I'm like, the fact is you're showing up and wanting to help Harold to such an extent. It's like, it could just be a bluff of like, oh yeah, I'm pretending like, because by just making it seem like Harold's going to take the fall, it's going to make Lou suspicious. But by being like, oh, both you and Lou are going to take the fall, means he's probably behind it. But for what purpose? But it seems like whoever it is that was on the phone knew what Harold was mixed up in a sense of maybe like the task force and maybe the Reddington thing, and maybe that plays some result in it. I mean, I'm surprised. Well, once again, they've all kind of come to Reddington in their own way with situations, whether it's Park, whether it's Wrestler. Even Harold kind of has turned to him in times, but this might be another situation where he just doesn't want to. He wants to try and handle things the honest way, but now you're being blackmailed, and in his mind it's like, oh, it's not just me that's going to take the fall, Lou is too, so I gotta find the truth. So maybe he will go to Reddington, but like I said, I think Lou's playing you, but we'll see. That's just my gut reaction there. For what purposes, what you're trying to get at the end of all of this, we'll have to wait and see. But other than that, going back to the Park situation, what I thought was interesting, because what Sand said to her earlier in the episode got to her, because it's like, oh yeah, there's darkness in everyone, and even in you, Agent Parker. She's like, yeah, and I'm disgusted by it, but she's like, why? Like, shouldn't you basically accept yourself? Like, you shouldn't have to basically change who you are. That darkness and everything is you, which obviously she doesn't like it, because she was kind of blowing up at Home Dude, head of the mob family, when the doctor got kidnapped, because they all thought he was responsible. But I think it's because maybe on some level, well, because I think Park wanted to do the right thing and make sure that her and her son were protected. And it's like, we kind of gave you our word that we'd help you, and it felt like we kind of failed you in that moment. So I think that was kind of rubbing her the wrong way. But even Aram was like, yeah, I have darkness in me too. You know, I mean, I've been in therapy since 10, and also used up all the inheritance my grandmother left me. And it's like, oh, how much was it? It was like $80,000+ he spent on therapy, which Park was like, yeah, it was worth every penny. Because at the end of the day, like, she was right. And for him, it's like, it's not so much about spending every day hating yourself and tearing yourself down because that darkness in you, because everyone has it in them, but it's more about accepting it as a part of yourself. In fact, loving yourself in spite of that darkness in you. So, but and obviously Park goes to talk to her husband later on. It's like, right, I thought I didn't tell you the truth about myself because I didn't want to take the chance that you wouldn't love me, but it's because I didn't like what I saw in the mirror. So at the end of the day, I'm going to try and love myself, and then maybe you can actually start to love me too. So we'll see whether that works out, whether her husband can forgive him. Like, marriage is, for better, for worse, happier or poorer, in sickness and health, right? So we'll see how this ultimately ends up playing out. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.